The sky was bleeding fire. Everything that had once been peaceful was now twisted in smoke, light, and noise. The clouds, if you could call them that anymore, were shredded into molten streaks by the high-altitude weapons carving through them. From the ridge, where the last few humans watched, it looked less like a sky and more like a dying god screaming into the void. She didn't blink. Couldn't. If she did, she might miss it, the signal, the sign, anything. The bunker behind her was shaking, the old steel creaking in protest with every distant boom. Someone was sobbing inside. Someone else was vomiting. No one spoke. Not anymore. The time for talking was long gone. She tightened her grip on the broken railing, the wind biting through her tattered gloves. Her breathing was steady, even though her chest ached with every inhale. They'd lost so many. Too many. And still, something inside her refused to let go. Not yet. Not until it was over. And it wasn't over. 32 hours, the voice beside her muttered, barely audible above the wind. That's all we've got. After that. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. They both knew what came after. Silence. No more earth. No more home. No more anything. She turned slightly to look at him. His eyes were sunken, dark hollows above sun-scarred cheeks. He hadn't slept, not really. None of them had. But beneath the grime, the fatigue, and the cracked lips, there was still something human behind his stare. A stubborn kind of fire that refused to burn out. "What's the count?" she asked, voice hoarse. He handed her the ragged tablet. It flickered once, barely hanging on. The numbers meant nothing anymore. Just more red. More blinking lights. More names crossed off. She didn't react. Didn't flinch. Just stared at it. Processed it. Then handed it back. Any word from the western outpost? Gone. She closed her eyes for a beat. Then nodded. How many of us are left? 86, he said. Maybe fewer. Most can't fight. Her fingers tightened on the rail until the metal bit into her skin. Then we fight for them. He didn't answer. Just looked away. Somewhere beyond the hills, something massive roared. The kind of sound that made your bones feel thin and your heart forget how to beat. The sky above pulsed with a dull, alien hum. Every time that sound came, the clouds shifted wrong, like they weren't clouds at all, just skin stretched across something bigger. They had learned to fear that sound. "What do you think they want?" he asked quietly. "Why finish us off like this?" She shook her head. Maybe it's not about wanting. Maybe this is just extermination. The word hung between them. Heavy. Final. She turned back to the horizon. The sun, or what was left of it, was trying to rise. The light was orange but wrong, filtered through layers of dust, radiation, and scorched atmosphere. It barely lit the ground anymore. Just long shadows and shapes moving where nothing should move. They used to fight in formations. Now it was just chaos. Skirmishes. Flash bombs in the dark. Whole towns vanishing overnight. Cities falling with no warning. And in the middle of it all, the humans who refused to bow. Who still had blood in their veins and defiance in their hearts. She remembered the first day it started. The first time the sky cracked open and something spilled through. Not ships. Not machines. Just things. Black shapes that didn't make sense, moving like smoke and lightning and noise. People said it wasn't even a war. Just a purge. One planet out of many. A cleanup job. But humanity didn't go quietly. They never had. She remembered watching the feeds as Earth's orbital defenses lit up the skies, thousands of them firing at once. The screams. The silence after. The way the ocean started boiling in places they shouldn't. The way the stars disappeared one by one. She remembered when her brother stopped answering the comms. She remembered when the power grids failed. She remembered the silence that came after the last beacon went dark. But even now, something inside her stayed upright. Held the line. There were children in the bunker. Elders. People who had seen the oceans when they were still blue. People who remembered music. Stories. Kindness. If they had to die, then they would do it standing. Fighting. Screaming into the dark. "Do you still have the codes?" she asked. He nodded. "They haven't cracked them. Not yet." "Good. We'll need them." "For what?" he asked. "We've got 86 people. No ships. No power grid. And they've started landing." She looked at him. Really looked. For one last fight. He didn't reply. Just stared at her for a moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded. She turned and walked back into the bunker, the air thick with tension and fear. A few pairs of eyes met hers, hollow and tired, but still searching for something. She gave them what she could. "Suit up," she said. "All of you. We move before nightfall." There was a pause. Then, slowly people began to move. Weapons were checked. Armor was patched together. Old mechs were hauled from the shadows, their servos whining from lack of oil. Even the broken ones were brought forward, scavenged for parts or turned into barricades. Someone laughed. A dry, cracked thing that barely resembled joy. But it was something. They didn't have a real plan. They didn't have a chance. But that didn't stop them. It never had. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the sharp scent of ion burn. Something massive was moving in the valley below, too far to see but close enough to feel. The sound it made wasn't meant for ears. It scraped against the back of the mind like claws on bone. She pressed her forehead to the cold wall for a second. Just a second. Please. Just let us hurt them. Let them feel it. Her hands trembled as she pulled the armor over her shoulders. Not from fear. From rage. 32 hours. That's all they had. But maybe, just maybe, 32 hours was enough. There was an old satellite uplink still working in the bunker's lowest level. Faint. Flickering. But operational. She used it once, weeks ago, to send a blind transmission. One last message into the void. She never expected a reply. But now, as she passed the comms panel, the light was blinking. She stopped. Stare. That light hadn't blinked since the others went dark. She turned to the tech, barely 16, face streaked with grease, eyes wide. Was that always on? He shook his head pale. She moved fast, crossing the room and jamming her fingers against the receiver. Static. Then a voice. Broken, weak but real. If you're hearing this, we received your signal. Reinforcements en route. Hold the line. Repeat, hold the line. Humanity is not done yet. She froze. The tech started sobbing. She didn't. She stared at the comm and something old and powerful flickered to life in her chest. Hope. Real, burning, defiant hope. She turned to the others. Gear up. Help is coming. The boy stared at her. You think they'll make it in time? No, she said. But that's not the point. From the ridge, the sky lit up again, this time not with death, but with streaks of fire falling upward. Something was breaking orbit. Something human. She didn't smile. But her eyes burned brighter than they had in days. They still had time. One last stand. One last fight. And they'd make sure the enemy never forgot it. She stepped into the light, weapon humming at her side, armor creaking as she moved forward. Somewhere out there, humanity was still alive. And it was on its way home. But until then they would hold. She looked up at the sky, her voice low. Come and get us. Then the wind howled louder, the sound of engines cutting through the smoke, and something massive began descending toward the valley. The final fight was about to begin. And not everyone would make it. But they would make it count. The boy followed her up the slope. His hands trembled as he adjusted the old pulse rifle slung over his back. It didn't fit him right, none of the gear did. He hadn't been meant for this. None of them had. He was born after the first wave hit, after the governments collapsed, after the skies turned red. He didn't remember a world with sunlight or birds. He'd never touched grass that wasn't ash-covered. And yet here he was, following her into what could be the last stand humanity would ever make. She glanced back at him once, noting how he kept his eyes down, away from the smoke in the distance. That was smart. You didn't stare too long. Not anymore. You could go mad watching what they were doing to the land. He noticed her looking. Straightened his shoulders a bit. Tried to stand taller. What's your name? She asked. Does it matter? It might. He hesitated, then said, Kale? She nodded. You ever fired that rifle? No. Good. Don't think of it like a weapon. Think of it like your voice. If something tries to silence you, speak louder. He blinked, clearly unsure what to make of that. She didn't wait for a response. The slope leveled out and the ridge came into view. They weren't alone. About 24 others stood there watching the dark horizon. Most were injured. All were exhausted. But every one of them had some kind of weapon in hand, even if it was just a rusted blade or a repurposed mining drill. The man from earlier stood closest to the edge, scanning the distant lights. She stepped up beside him. How bad? She asked. Worse than we thought, he said. Scouts spotted a tunneler. Big one. Burrowing in from the east. If it breaks through the lower shelf, we lose the bunker. He nodded grimly. Any chance we can collapse the ridge before it gets here? Not unless you've got 6 tons of antimatter hidden in your coat. She almost smiled. We'll have to be loud then. He passed her the scope. She raised it, studied the shifting haze. Heat waves twisted the shapes, but they were definitely moving closer. Hulking figures, dozens of them, walking wrong, bending space with each step. Behind them, a black mist poured across the ground like oil. They didn't come in ships anymore. They were the ships. She handed back the scope. We don't wait for them to reach us. We meet them halfway. The others heard. Some stiffened. A few nodded. No more hiding, she said loud enough for all to hear. This isn't about winning. It's about hurting them. It's about reminding them that we're still here. A man limped forward, face crisscrossed with old burns. You really think we can slow them down? We don't have to slow them. We just have to make them bleed. He didn't laugh, but something in his eyes warmed. Hell, I can do that. Another voice piped up. I've got an old fusion core from the digger. Not stable, but we'll use it, she said. A third voice. We still have the railgun frame. It's cracked, but if we mount it high and reinforce it. Do it. And just like that, movement returned. Energy. Hope. A thin, desperate kind, but hope all the same. She stepped away, found a quiet spot near the edge, and knelt. Her knees ached. Her chest still hurt when she breathed too deep. But none of that mattered now. She pulled a faded photo from her inner pocket. 3 people. A woman, a man, and a child with wild hair and missing front teeth. She touched the edge of the image gently. I'll see you soon, she whispered. Just a little longer. Then she stood. The sky was dimming now, clouds thickening. The wind shifted, carrying that hum again. That awful pressure against the skull. Some people screamed when they heard it. Others passed out. But most of the ones left just clenched their teeth and endured. They were the ones who had already lost everything. There was nothing left to take. An hour later, the defenses were in place. They had 2 mounted cannons that still worked, for drones with half-dead batteries, a line of hastily rigged explosives, and a makeshift comm relay that barely held a signal. Some had armor. Most didn't. But every single person carried a weapon, even if it was just a jagged pipe. The fusion core had been wired into the base of the ridge. If things went south, it would go critical, and take half the valley with it. Cale stood beside her again, hands steadier now. He'd carved something into the butt of his rifle. She didn't ask what. Below them, in the valley, shapes emerged from the fog. Big ones. Crawling. Slithering. Walking. Some had too many limbs. Others had none. They shifted like liquid wrapped in armor, their outlines fuzzy, wrong. They're not even pretending to hide anymore, the man beside her muttered. They don't think we can stop them. Can we? We don't have to. We just have to matter. The front line advanced, slow and steady. She raised her hand. Waited. The tension in the air felt like lightning pressed against the skin. Closer. Closer. Now. Fire. The first cannon lit up with a roar, sending a bolt of white-hot plasma into the nearest creature. It staggered, reeled back, but didn't fall. Then the second shot followed, slamming into its center. A howl split the air, high and unnatural. Then came the return fire. Blades of light cut the air. One of the mounted guns exploded. Someone screamed. The ridge lit up as dozens of humans opened fire. The enemy didn't slow. One of the creatures lunged forward, absorbing fire, tearing into the ground with massive claws. Another crawled on the walls, its limbs reaching impossible lengths. A third began to pulse, rhythmically building something inside itself. She saw it coming. Down. The ridge exploded as a pulse wave hit, flinging bodies like ragdolls. She slammed into the dirt, ears ringing. Cale landed hard beside her, coughing. He looked at her, blood on his face. They're not stopping. I know. The first wave was almost at the base of the ridge now. Time was running out. She reached for her comm. Detonators ready? Affirmative, came the reply, barely audible. Blow the left path. Now. A deep rumble followed. Fire split the earth. Part of the valley collapsed inward, taking 3 of the larger beasts with it. One screeched until its voice broke. But it wasn't enough. They kept coming. She crawled to her feet, shoulder burning, and pointed to the fusion core relay. If I go, don't follow, she told Cale. He stared at her. No. It's not a request. I'm not letting you die alone. Her eyes narrowed. Then stay out of my way. She turned and ran down the slope, weaving through craters and bodies, fire and smoke. The enemy saw her. Several of them turned. She didn't care. This was the plan. She was the bait. Behind her, humans surged down, covering her with wild, chaotic fire. Drones screamed overhead, crashing into enemy lines, exploding on impact. The fusion core was glowing now, unstable, whining like a caged beast. She reached the relay, keyed in the final sequence. Overdrive enabled. Detonation in 300 seconds. 5 minutes. That was all they had to hold. Behind her, the man from before yelled something she didn't catch. But she saw the change. The sky was splitting. Not from them. From above. Streaks of light fell like meteors, but too fast, too sharp, too straight. One hit the valley floor, then rose up again, burning with a blue glow. Then another. And another. Then a voice came through the comm, clear this time. Echo command to ground team. You are not alone. Repeat, you are not alone. Hold that ridge. She couldn't believe it. Human ships. Real ones. Clean and fast and deadly. They screamed over the horizon, lighting the enemy in white fire. The creatures faltered. For the first time, they hesitated. But it wasn't over. Not yet. She turned toward the fusion core. The timer ticked down. 4 minutes. Another wave of creatures surged forward, desperate now. This was it. She turned to Kale, who had somehow reached her, rifle shaking in his hands. You should have stayed up there. Not a chance, he said. She grabbed his hand. And waited. As the enemy came. As the core hummed. As the sky burned with reinforcements that might still be too late. As Earth made one final stand. Then, just before the timer reached 3 minutes, the signal cut out. The comm went dead. The ships vanished. The creatures stopped. All at once. Then something rose behind the clouds. Massive. Shadowed. Not like the others. Older. Angrier. Watching. And for the first time she felt something colder than fear. Not death. Judgment. Then the wind stopped. And the sky turned black. She couldn't move. Not from fear. Not from injury. Something held her in place. Her fingers tightened around Kale's, but even that small motion felt like pushing through thick mud. The world hadn't gone silent, it had gone heavy. The air pressed down on her chest. The weight of that thing above them was more than mass. It was presence. Like the universe itself had turned to look. Kale swallowed hard. What is that? She didn't answer. Because she didn't know. It wasn't like the others. The creatures that had torn through cities, devoured oceans, cracked mountains, they were brute force, horror made physical. This was something else. It didn't need to move. Didn't need to roar or lunge. It just existed and everything below it trembled. Behind them, the ridge was silent. The others felt it too. The kind of stillness that made people forget to breathe. The black in the sky wasn't a ship. Not entirely. It shifted slowly like it was turning toward them. No lights. No sound. Then something rippled across the air. Not a wave. A thought. Unspoken but sharp. It wasn't in a language. It was older than that. A message carved straight into their minds. Enough. Kale dropped to his knees, hands over his ears. Blood ran from his nose. He wasn't even crying, just stunned, wide-eyed like a part of him had broken. She bit her lip hard to stay grounded. Tasted copper. Good. Pain meant she was still here. Still human. The core behind her was still humming. Timer still ticking down. 2 minutes left. She looked up again, forcing her eyes to focus on the thing in the sky. You want us gone? She whispered. Another pulse. You were warned. Her breath caught. Somewhere in her memory something shifted. Words she hadn't heard in years echoed back. A warning. Buried deep. Passed between broken satellites and half-dead relays. A message that had come before the war started. She thought it was myth. Rumor. Desperate minds turning fear into prophecy. But now, maybe not. Kale's voice cracked. Why us? She reached down, pulled him to his feet. Because we said no. He looked up at her. That's it. That's enough. She turned toward the ridge. Movement again, someone waving. The comms were still down, but they were trying to regroup. Reinforcements hadn't returned. Whatever signal had brought them, it was gone. Or blocked. The black shape above didn't leave. Just watched. Waiting. The creatures below didn't advance either. They stood still, vibrating with unreadable energy, like they were caught in place. She ran toward the others. Kale followed. Her legs ached. Her lungs screamed. But she ran. They reached the makeshift barricade just as 2 of the surviving fighters finished rewiring the backup transmitter. A young woman with grease on her hands turned. Still nothing. Whatever that is up there, it's jamming every channel. Doesn't need to, someone muttered. It just thinks and we bleed. The man who had stood with her earlier, gruff, bearded, exhausted, looked at her. You saw it, didn't you? Up close. She nodded. What is it? I don't know. But it's not here to fight. He frowned. What then? To decide. The others looked at each other, unsure. Decide what? someone asked. If we live. The words tasted like ash. Saying them out loud gave them power. But she didn't regret it. They needed truth, not comfort. Another pulse hit. Softer this time. Like a whisper across a battlefield. This is your last breath. The ground shook. The fusion core behind them flickered, then stabilized again. The countdown continued. 1 minute. She turned to the man. If that thing lets the others loose, we don't stand a chance. We set off the core. Take them all with us. He looked at her, steady. Even if it means we die too? She nodded. Especially then. There was silence. Then a voice from the back. I didn't crawl through 2 years of dirt just to bow down now. Another, we lost too much to give up. One by one they stood straighter. Tighter grips on weapons. No one looked away. Kale stared at the sky, jaw clenched. I don't want to die. But I won't kneel either. She felt a tightness in her chest. Not fear. Not grief. Pride. They were barely standing. Filthy. Broken. Surrounded. But they were still here. Still human. She looked at the core timer. 30 seconds. The sky pulsed again. This time not words. Images. Flashes. The first cities falling. Oceans boiling. Children running through streets that no longer existed. Places she recognized long gone now. Memories. No warnings. That thing above them, it had been watching from the start. The war hadn't been random. It had been a test. And they were failing. She screamed up at it, voice raw. We're still here. Another flash. More death. Then something different. A face. Human. Young. Pale eyes, dark skin. Standing in the ruins. Smiling. Then another face. An old man missing an arm, holding a book in the middle of a crater. Then another. And another. Children. Teachers. Fighters. Dreamers. Not soldiers. Survivors. The message changed. You resist. What? She swallowed hard. Then said softly, because we remember. The pulse paused. Then you may choose. Her heart stopped. The core behind her buzzed louder. 20 seconds. What choice? Kale asked. But the sky didn't answer. Instead, the creatures below moved again. Slowly. Not charging. Parting. They stepped aside. Creating a path. A narrow one. Leading deeper into the valley. Toward the heart of whatever nightmare had spawned all this. The black mass in the sky trembled like it was waiting. She stared, unsure. A trap? A test? The man beside her shook his head. Feels like suicide. Maybe it is, she said. But her voice was calm now. Hopeful even. She turned to Kale. Stay here. If I don't come back, I'm going with you. She didn't argue. Not because she agreed, but because she knew it would be pointless. They stepped toward the edge of the ridge. The path below was lined with monsters. Every one of them watched, unmoving. Kale looked up. They're letting us through? For now. The fusion core kept ticking. 10 seconds. She turned to the others. If I give the signal, blow it. The man gave a slow nod. Good luck. She and Kale started down. Dust kicked around them, curling in the wind. The ground was soft, cracked. Everything smelled like ozone and rot. But still, no attack. As they walked, something strange happened. The air grew warmer. The ground smoother. And ahead, a glow. Soft. Faintly blue. Like the inside of a living thing. She realized what they were walking toward wasn't a command center or hive. It was a memory. A place pulled from their own past. Ahead, ruins. Not alien. Human. Concrete buildings, scorched and half-buried, but familiar. Signs in English. Wreckage of a playground. A bus stop. A school. Kale gasped. I've seen pictures like this. Before the war. She nodded. So have I. They reached the center of it. There, in the middle, was a figure. Not alien. Not monster. A human. Or something wearing the shape of one. They stood still, hands behind their back, head tilted. She stepped forward slowly. You're one of them? Yes. But, you look like us. The figure smiled, thin and tired. We learned. Slowly. Kale frowned. Why are you doing this? The figure studied him. Because what comes after you is worse. She felt ice run through her veins. What do you mean? You weren't the first. You won't be the last. But you were different. We broke many worlds. Most stayed broken. But your kind refuses. That's why you attacked us? Kale asked. To see if you'd stop. You didn't. The woman stepped forward. So what now? You let us go. The figure shook their head. We offer a choice. Behind them, the sky rumbled again. The mass above shifted. The figure looked at her, something ancient in their eyes. One step forward and your species joins the next test. You survive it and you may stand beside us. And if we say no? The figure stepped aside, revealing a narrow tunnel cut into the earth. Inside lights blinked. Safe. Warm. Seal. A shelter. Hidden. We leave. You rebuild. But you never leave that hole. Not ever again. Kale's jaw dropped. So live as prisoners, or die as fighters? Live as memory, the figure corrected. Or become more. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she turned to Kale. What do you think? He hesitated, then said, I think we've come too far to stay quiet. She smiled. The figure didn't move. Your choice, they said. And the countdown ticked down to 0. But the core didn't explode. It simply went dark. Silent. Waiting. The sky still loomed above. The path ahead still glowed. And all around, the eyes of monsters watched. Not with hunger, but with expectation. They were waiting for humanity's answer. And they would wait just one moment longer. The silence was a scream. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears, faster than it should have been. Not from running. From knowing. The choice wasn't just a test, it was a line. Once they stepped over it, there'd be no way back. Either they entered whatever waited beyond that glowing tunnel, or they vanished into history like every other species that failed. The figure stood motionless beside the tunnel's entrance. Their eyes, so human it hurt, watched her. Not with cruelty. Not even curiosity. With hope. That made it worse. Kale shifted beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked ready to bolt, but his legs held. Barely. Are we really supposed to believe this? He whispered. That they're just going to let us pick? She didn't look at him when she answered. I don't think they care what we believe. They're watching what we do. Behind them, the sky pulsed again. No words this time. But it felt like pressure against her skin. Like the moment before lightning strikes when your bones start to hum. A warning. She turned to the figure. If we walk through that tunnel, what happens? The figure didn't blink. The others will follow. And the real test begins. And if we don't? Pause. You go back. But not up. You go down. You hide. Forever. Kale gritted his teeth. So it's not really a choice. Either walk into hell or rot in the dark. It's the closest thing to freedom we can offer, the figure said, and for a second, just a second, there was a flicker of sadness in their voice. Something deep inside her started to tremble. Because this wasn't just about war. It never was. It was about what came after. She stepped forward. The entrance to the tunnel pulsed faintly, reacting to her presence. The light grew brighter, warmer. Like it was welcoming her. Or preparing for something it had waited on for centuries. She turned to Kale. We don't have long. He looked at the tunnel, then the figure, then the sky above them. And then, back at her. I trust you. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Not because she didn't deserve them. But because she wasn't sure anyone deserved that kind of trust anymore. They stepped toward the entrance together. And the earth shifted beneath their feet. The light flickered. Behind them, the creatures lining the path all took a single step forward. It wasn't an attack. Not yet. But it was close. Kale whispered, I think they're done waiting. She glanced up. The black shape in the sky trembled. For the first time it moved just slightly, descending. A low vibration rolled through the ground. Pebbles danced. Cracks split the dirt at her feet. The figure turned its head toward the sky. They're not patient. You must decide. She clenched her fists. Everything in her screamed for clarity, for a sign, for a moment, something, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. There would be no perfect answer. Only action. Behind her, voices crackled through the static on her comm. It startled her. She hadn't heard real transmission in hours. Copy? Do you copy? We see movement, unknown formation. Static swallowed the rest. But the voice was human. Human. She grabbed her earpiece, pressing it tighter. Say again? Multiple contacts. Large mass descending. We're coming in hot, repeat hot, stand by for evac. The figure tilted their head, listening. Then they smiled. It wasn't kind. They're coming to pull you out. But they don't understand what waits above. If they interfere now, they fail. She turned back to the sky. From the distant north, 3 long trails of smoke streaked across the clouds. Dropships. The last of their support. Too far to help in time. Close enough to ruin everything. Kale cursed under his breath. If they land, they'll die, she finished. The ground shook again, this time harder. Dust filled the air. The creatures flanking them began to growl, low and deep, a sound like old machines turning to life. She looked at the figure. You wanted them to come, didn't you? The figure didn't answer. But the look in their eyes said everything. This wasn't about her. It wasn't even about the choice. It was about timing. And they were out of it. She spun to Kale. Get on the comm, tell them to stop. Tell them to pull back. I don't know if I can reach them. Try. He dropped to one knee, scrambling to bypass the interference. His fingers shook over the cracked controls. Sweat dripped onto the wires. The sky cracked open above them. The mass descended faster now. Not falling. Not landing. Arriving. Thunder rolled, except there were no clouds. Only presence. Pure and suffocating. The air twisted. Sound warped. She dropped to one knee as pressure stabbed behind her eyes. One of the creatures near the path snapped its jaws. And another took a step forward. Too far. Too soon. The figure in front of the tunnel turned suddenly, face sharpening. They must not act yet. They're not listening, she shouted. Kale cried out behind her. I've got a signal, barely. They're asking for coordinates. Tell them to abort. Now. He yelled into the mic, but the air distorted again. The signal broke. Too late. A shockwave ripped through the ridge behind them. The ground split. One of the dropships exploded in mid-air, burning into pieces before it even touched the ground. Flames lit the horizon. Screams echoed through the comm. Then static. Only static. The creatures roared in unison. It was the first real sound they'd made. And it was rage. The sky darkened to black. Not from clouds. From wings. Shapes spilled from the sky like liquid shadow. Dozens. Hundreds. Kale screamed, pulling her toward the tunnel. Run, asterisk now, asterisk. But her feet didn't move. The figure stepped in front of them, raising both hands. For a moment everything paused. Even the monsters stopped. Final choice, the figure said. Walk now, or be erased. She looked at Kale. At the broken ridge behind them. At the twisted horizon. Then at the tunnel. It didn't shine anymore. It glowed. The figure dropped their arms. And the sky screamed. She grabbed Kale's hand. And stepped forward. Not into safety. Not into peace. But into the heart of the storm. The darkness folded around them. And the war above began again. It wasn't a tunnel. Not really. As soon as her foot hit the ground on the other side, the world changed, tilted, stretched, inverted. Light bent sideways. Her skin tingled like she'd walked through an electric storm, and the air tasted like metal and old memory. Kale stumbled behind her, coughing hard, eyes wide with panic. He looked back, but the entrance was already gone. No trace of the world they'd left. No burning sky, no dropships, no figure with two human eyes. Just silence. And something that felt too big pressing from every side. They stood in a field that wasn't a field. Smooth glass stretched for miles beneath their boots, reflecting a sky that kept shifting between colors she didn't have names for. In the distance, strange towers floated upside down, humming faintly like the inside of a power station. Nothing made sense. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that every part of it was designed, built with intention, as if someone, or something, had created this place just for them. Kale touched her shoulder, voice barely above a whisper. Where are we? She swallowed hard. The test. He glanced around, eyes darting. There's no one here. They're watching. As if to confirm her words, the ground trembled, softly this time, not like before. More like breathing. They turned. And the reflection in the glass wasn't their own. Two figures stood behind them in the mirror-like floor. She spun around. Nothing there. She looked down again. The figures in the reflection moved, not copying her, but acting on their own. One stepping forward, the other standing still, something glowing in their chest like fire under skin. She reached for her sidearm before remembering it was gone, stripped from her during the crossing, or maybe erased by whatever this place was. Her fingers closed around nothing. Kale looked down too. That's not us. No, she said slowly. But they want us to think it is. The reflections continued to move, growing clearer with each passing second. Not copies, asterisk echoes star. Of who they could have been. Or maybe, who they still might become. Then a voice filled the air, not spoken, not heard, but felt deep in their bones. You have crossed. The choice remains unfinished. Her chest tightened. We already made the choice. We stepped through. One choice reveals another. Kale shook his head. This isn't what they said. This isn't what we were told. There is more. The ground beneath them began to crack, not violently but with precision. Lines split through the glass in perfect symmetry, spiraling outward like circuitry, and at the center of the spiral, a shape began to rise. A platform. And on it, a body. Not alien. Human. She stepped forward, heart pounding. The man lying on the platform was pale, eyes closed, breathing shallow but alive. His face was lined with scars. A deep burn crossed one shoulder, partially healed. And clutched in his hand was a fragment of metal, war-marked, scorched. She recognized it instantly. It was the insignia of the first mission. The one that vanished years ago. Cale whispered, "That's... I know." He was supposed to be dead. The entire squad had been lost. MIA presumed unrecoverable. But he was here. In the test. Kept alive. What? She reached for his hand, and the moment she touched it, images slammed into her head. Not memories. Not hers. A battlefield where the sky bled fire. Screams echoing through corridors of steel. Creatures that moved like thoughts and tore through minds like paper. The first squad hadn't failed. They passed. And this was what came after. The survivors weren't honored. They were buried in silence. Hidden. Forgotten. Because what they'd seen would have shattered the rest of humanity. She jerked back, breath ragged. Cale stared. "What did you see?" "They lied to us," she whispered. "The test, it's not to choose a future. It's to rewrite it." He blinked. "What does that even mean?" She looked at the man again. I think they showed him what would happen if humanity kept going down the path we were on. And he broke. Or maybe he refused to help them change it. Change what? Everything. The light above them dimmed. And then they heard another voice. This one wasn't deep and vast. It was familiar. Human. "I told them you'd come." The man on the platform opened his eyes. They were bloodshot and full of something far older than any soldier should have carried. She froze. "Who are you?" Cale asked. He sat up slowly. "We were the first to walk through. They said we'd be tested. They didn't tell us we'd be rewritten. We didn't pass or fail. We became part of it." She stepped back. "Part of what?" He smiled weakly. "The rewrite. They don't just want to see who we are. They want to build what we become." The air trembled again. And something massive rose behind the towers in the distance. A shadow stretching across the sky. Not a creature. Not a ship. A structure. It unfolded slowly as if waking after a long sleep. The man pointed toward it. "That's the second gate." Her pulse raced. "There's another one?" He nodded. Only one species made it that far before. They didn't survive the final phase. Why? They refused to let go of what they were. Cale frowned. "And if we don't?" The man looked at them both. "Then we fail too. And this place becomes your prison." The towers began to pulse, glowing in sequence. The same rhythm as before. Heartbeats. A countdown. She looked toward the gate. Then back at the man. "Why you?" she asked. "Why show us you now?" He closed his eyes. "Because I was the first to break." A sound like thunder split the air. Not from above. From beneath. The glass cracked wide. And something alive stirred far below. Shapes moved in the depths, human-like but wrong. Twisted echoes of soldiers, marching in a slow, endless loop. Cale stared. "What are they?" The man didn't answer. She knew. They were the ones who refused. Not killed. Repurposed. The stakes weren't just survival. They were identity. Everything that made humanity what it was, hope, rage, love, rebellion, was being judged piece by piece. And whatever was pulling the strings here wasn't looking for peace. It was looking for control. Her voice shook. "We need to move." The man didn't follow. "You go," he said. "I'm already part of it. But if you make it through the next gate, don't forget what you were before this. They'll try to make you forget." Cale pulled her back. The ground was splitting again, forming a path, not to safety but toward the massive structure in the distance. Each step glowed as it appeared. Each step could be a trap. She turned to Cale. He looked scared. But he nodded. And they ran. Behind them the glass shattered. The marching echoes rose. And the man watched them disappear into the unknown, whispering one final truth. They don't want a stronger humanity. They want a different one. The path kept forming only seconds before their feet touched down, one glowing tile at a time. Behind them, the sound of the shattered floor collapsing into an endless void chased every breath they took. Cale stumbled once, nearly fell, but she caught his arm and pulled him upright. Neither said a word. There wasn't time. The structure ahead loomed like a dying star, folding in and out of itself, massive and unnatural. Whatever waited inside it, whatever test was left, it had already begun before they got there. They crossed the threshold just as the platform behind them vanished completely. Darkness swallowed them whole. No floor. No ceiling. No sound. And then, light. Not from any one source. It came from within. Their skin glowed faintly, pulses of memory flashing under the surface. Childhood laughter. War zones. Old regrets. Choices. Regrets. Everything they were laid bare in flickers and fragments. She saw her brother's face, the last time he smiled before he shipped out. She saw the day she first killed, her hands trembling for hours after. She saw Cale's eyes when he lost his sister. The pain he never talked about. The guilt that wouldn't leave. Then the light deepened, thickened. And the voice came back, quieter this time. You are close. The choice must be made. She raised her voice. We already chose. That was the illusion. This is the truth. The light fell away like sand through fingers. And now there were others. People, humans, standing in a circle around them. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All dressed like soldiers, scientists, civilians. Some wore uniforms from missions decades past. Some had injuries that couldn't have healed. They weren't ghosts. They weren't projections. They were the missing. The first team. And more. Cale turned slowly, taking them in. They've been here this whole time. One of them stepped forward. A woman with graying hair and a long scar over her mouth. You're not the first to make it here. But you might be the last. She narrowed her eyes. What is this place? The cradle, the woman said. Where humanity is reshaped. Why us? Because you kept fighting. Even when they wanted surrender. Even when you knew the odds. Cale stepped forward. So we passed. The woman's expression didn't change. You endured. That's not the same. Suddenly the space around them rippled. Two versions of Earth appeared, floating midair like twin visions of the future. One was clean, perfect. Cities humming with uniformity. No war. No chaos. But also, no choice. Every person moved with the same rhythm, spoke the same way. Peace at a cost. The other Earth was raw, imperfect. But alive. Passion burned in every corner. Riots. Innovation. Love. Struggle. It was messy. But it was real. And then the final test was spoken. One path ends conflict. The other allows it to continue. Choose. Cale looked at her. Her stomach twisted. That was it. The point of everything. They weren't being tested for survival. They were being tested to decide the future of their kind. Cale's voice cracked. They want us to give up our freedom for safety. She looked at the version of Earth that gleamed like a polished lie. That's not living. He shook his head. No, it's not. And then, without warning, one of the figures in the circle rushed forward, grabbing Cale and twisting something sharp into his ribs. He gasped. Dropped to his knees. She screamed. The crowd surged, but too slow. The attacker pulled back, revealing a face that wasn't human, not anymore. Just a mask stretched over something mechanical. A hybrid. Someone who had given in to the other side. You chose wrong, it hissed. And then it leapt at her. She raised her arm, already moving, already burning with instinct. And the moment her hand touched the attacker's skin, everything exploded. Not in violence. In truth. She saw what they'd been hiding. Not just the other side of the test, but the origin of it. The ones pulling the strings weren't alien. They were human, once. Survivors of a future so broken they came back to change it. But to them, peace meant control. Order. No risk. No passion. No love. Just stability. They thought they were saving the species. But they'd forgotten what made humanity worth saving. Her vision cleared. Cale was on the ground, bleeding, but alive. She stood over the hybrid, heart pounding, and said nothing. Just stared. And that silence spoke louder than any speech ever could. Then the voice returned. So you choose struggle. Yes, she said, tears burning in her eyes. Because struggle means freedom. Everything cracked again. The figures vanished. The false futures dissolved. The room broke open like a shell. And they were standing on a hill. Back on Earth. Or maybe, not the same one. Ships hovered in the sky not to destroy, but to watch. The stars looked different. The air was cleaner. People moved in the distance, helping each other. There was still chaos. There was still division. But there was hope. Cale groaned, clutching his side. Did we make it? She nodded, helping him stand. Behind them, the gate shimmered once more, then flickered. Collapsed. Gone. Final. No way back. No way forward. Just now. A soft sound broke the quiet. The man from the platform, the one who'd warned them, was standing in the field. Alive. Different. He looked at them with tired, sad eyes. "You did what we couldn't," he said. "You remembered who we were." And then he vanished. No words. No explanation. Just dust on the wind. Kale leaned against her. "So what now?" She looked at the world around them. This world. Their world. And her voice was steady. "We live. We fight. We remember." But just before they started walking, just as the sun began to rise, she saw something in the sky. A flash of metal. Far above. Too small to make out. But moving fast. Not a satellite. Not human. Watching. And deep down a chill ran through her. Because the test wasn't over. It had never been over. It had just begun again. The sky stayed quiet after that flash of metal. But the silence felt different now, not peaceful, not threatening. Just waiting. She stood with Kale in the field, the wind brushing their faces, the weight of what they'd just lived through still sinking in. He leaned into her a little more with each step, but he kept moving. "I thought we were done. I thought it would all just stop." "It did," she said softly. "In a way. The old way. It ended. Now it's something else." Kale gave a small, tired smile. "You mean more problems?" "I mean real life. The kind where we choose." They walked until they reached a broken road cutting through the grass. The pavement was cracked, overgrown with weeds, but it led toward something, a small cluster of buildings in the distance. Smoke curled from chimneys. There were people. Humans. Working, rebuilding, living. The sight hit her harder than anything else had. "We're not the only ones," she whispered. They made it to the edge of the settlement by nightfall. The people there didn't recognize them, but they recognized what they were. Survivors. Fighters. Family. They were welcomed without questions, fed without conditions. There was warmth in the way hands reached out to help, in the quiet smiles exchanged over shared meals. There was still a world here. A human one. Imperfect, cracked, alive. Over the next few days they rested. Kale healed slowly, the wound deep but clean. She spent hours just watching the sky, her thoughts circling like birds above her. She kept waiting for another attack, another message, another test. But nothing came. No ships. No voices. Just days. One after the next. It was strange, adjusting to stillness after so much chaos. Stranger still, knowing the fight they thought was about saving Earth had really been about saving who they were inside. Kale joined the settlement's defense patrol when he could walk again. She took on rebuilding an old communication station at the far edge of town. It wasn't much, just rusted antenna parts and a dead console. But with a few salvaged power cells and steady hands, she brought it back online. Static filled the room at first, but beneath it, a voice. Cracked, distant, human. "This is Station Delta 9. Broadcasting from the southern ridge. If anyone hears this, you're not alone." She played the message for Kale later that night. He didn't say much, but his eyes said everything. There were others. Other survivors. Other humans who had made it through their own versions of the same fight. Not everyone had been part of the same final test. Some had been trapped in simulations. Others left wandering broken systems, others still fighting in places that hadn't seen peace in decades. The war hadn't been just one war. It had splintered, scattered, and they were the thread trying to stitch it all back together. Weeks turned into months. They helped organize missions to nearby regions, reconnecting with old stations, clearing ruins, tracking signals. She met more survivors. Engineers. Pilots. A woman who'd held a city together alone with nothing but willpower. A boy who'd grown up underground, knowing only shadows. A medic who still carried the tags of everyone she couldn't save. Each person carried pieces of the old world, pain, strength, memory. They talked around fires late into the night. Not just about what they'd lost, but what came next. The world they wanted. No more top-down commands. No more silent overseers pretending to know best. This new Earth wasn't built on clean slates or perfect systems. It was built on grit. On learning from scars instead of covering them up. One day she climbed a ridge just outside the town. She carried a small transmitter in her hand, one connected to the system she and Kale had cobbled together over months. When she reached the top, she set it down on a flat stone, aimed the dish toward the stars and pressed the button. Her voice filled the transmitter. "This is Earth. If you're out there, we made it. We remember who we are. We chose to stay human. We chose freedom even when it meant pain. If you need a place to come home to, we're here. And we're not giving up." She let the message loop. Not because she expected a reply. but because someone somewhere might need to hear it. As she walked back to town, she saw Kale on the path below, waiting. He waved once. She raised a hand in return. "How many times you think we'll have to say that before someone answers?" he asked when she reached him. "As many as it takes." He grinned. "Sounds like the start of another fight." She smiled back. "Maybe. But not the kind we lose." The settlement grew over time. One by one, old satellites flickered back to life. Distant outposts responded. Pieces of the old world surfaced, not as rulers or relics but as reminders. Of mistakes. Of stories. Of the need to do better. She saw families forming again. Children laughing. People making music, writing stories, planting trees. There were still problems. Conflicts. Grief. But no one was being told what to feel or who to be. That was the victory. Not a clean ending, but a real one. Kale took her back to the gate site one day. The place where everything had ended and begun again. The stone path was gone. The platform had collapsed. But the shape of it lingered in the ground like a scar. She knelt and pressed her fingers to the soil. It was warm. She whispered something, a name, a promise, a memory. She wasn't even sure what exactly. Just something human. Something that mattered. Kale stood beside her, silent. Eventually they left a marker. Not a monument. Just a smooth piece of metal engraved with one line. "We chose to stay." That night they watched the stars again. "You think they'll ever come back?" Kale asked. She thought about the ships. The voice. The test. "Maybe. But we'll be ready. And this time we'll choose again." He nodded. "Then we better make this place worth defending." She rested her head against his shoulder. For the first time in what felt like years she felt still. Not because everything was fixed, but because she understood. There would always be fights. Some against enemies. Some against fear. Some just to hold on to hope. But as long as they kept choosing, kept remembering what made them human, they hadn't lost. They never would. The wind blew across the hill. The stars didn't answer. They didn't have to. The last fight was over. And everything that came after was theirs.